Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today, per request, we're going to talk about Mono White and Pioneer, which just so happens to be my primary deck in Pioneer at this moment. We're going to talk about what the deck does, how it goes about doing that, and any tips or tricks I can give you along the way. Let's jump into it. This is what I would say to be the premier aggro deck of the format. It is a white weenie deck through and through. Specifically, it is a white humans deck. So let's start with the lands. It is your basic go wide strategy. So we have our man lands in Cave of the Frost Dragon. We're just playing one of them because it's really important. Our third land enters untapped. Playing a Castle Ardenvale for when the games go really, really long. We can make a 1/1 human. Pairs really good with Thalia's Lieutenant and other synergies in the deck. Playing two Ganjo, both as a untapped land, and it makes combat so much easier, both defending and racing and attacking. As far as our other man lands, we are playing 4 Mutavaults because they are humans, and 2 Mishra's Foundry. The reason we're playing the 2 Mishra's Foundry is that while they're not humans, Mutavault is also an assembly worker. So you can use Mishra's Foundry to pump up Mutavaults when they attack. And being manlands in and of themselves, it just gives us a little extra reach against those slower decks. And then we're playing Sheffet Dunes for, we go super wide, but we have a lot of mana. We can cash in on some of our lands by giving our homies +1/+1. To go through the deck, we're playing 4 Brave the Elements. Brave the Elements is one of the most powerful cards in our deck. It's a protection spell, but most of the time, what we're going to be using Brave the Elements for is to be able to attack through things. So a lot of decks have creatures of the same colors or similar colors, and so when we build up a big board, especially if our board gets all gummed up, we can just Brave the Elements, jam in for lethal, or 2-turn lethal, or whatever. But again, it can also be used as like a God's Willing or whatever to protect your creatures if need be. Dauntless Bodyguard, we are mostly playing as a 2-power 1-drop. That is the correct tribe. But it is also really good to protect the cards that are really powerful or powerful in certain matchups. Basically our 2-drops and 3-drops. If we can Dauntless Bodyguard, that makes our board significantly stronger. But playing it as a 1-mana 2/1 is excellent in and of itself. Hopeful Initiate is a 1-mana 1/2, sure, but with training, it can get pumped up very, very quickly. It is on tribe, and against some decks, its ability really matters. Being able to pay 3 mana, remove 2 +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control, and destroy target artifact or enchantment. There's a lot of +1/+1 counters that is being given out, not just with the training in Hopeful Initiate, throughout this entire deck. And notice that it says, take +1/+1 counters off among creatures you control, so it doesn't have to be off the training off a no Hopeful Initiate. So being able to just kill artifacts and enchantments at will in a normal game is a very powerful thing, and sometimes this just ends up being a 1-mana 2-power creature, as long as it's not the first thing that you play or attack with. Playing a 1 of Kythium, again, it's just a 1-mana 2/1, but also has the ability to get a lot better. We want to play the game of playing multiple 1-drops, so I'm really afraid of playing multiple Kythians. If we have multiple in our opening hand, we can't do some of our more powerful hands. But being able to gain Indestructible Talent Turn is a cute ability, and if we can ever flip it to Kythian Battleforged, we're in great shape. Recruitment Officer, again, we're playing it as a 1-mana 2/1 with upside, similar to Dauntless Bodyguard. This upside is for the late game. When we get flooded, we don't have enough creatures, we can pay 4 mana to look at top 4 cards of our library and reveal a creature card that costs 3 or less and put them into our hand. So again, we play this card as both incredibly good early in the game as an aggressive creature, and then if we happen to have it late in the game, it gives us an amazing amount of reach by just having something to dump our mana into every turn. Luminarch Aspirant is a 2-mana 1/1. However, at the beginning of your combat on your turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on card creature you control. So I like to think of this as a 2-mana 2/2, except one of those power is haste. Because a lot of our starting hands are just going to be a 2-power 1-drop, play Luminarch Aspirant, put a counter on a 2-power 1-drop, be attacking for 3 on turn 2. That's a really, really common play pattern. Thalia barely affects us. It affects us a little more post-board. We have a lot more non-creature spells post-board. But main deck, we only have Brave the Elements. So Thalia messes up most other decks. First Strike really matters too. If you can start putting counters on it with Thalia's Lieutenant and Luminarch Aspirant, Thalia can become a formidable force that becomes really, really difficult to block and difficult to remove because of her ability. Thalia's Lieutenant is kind of the glue that holds the deck together. It gets a +1/+1 on all humans you control when you play it, and whenever a human enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1. So this is kind of our pseudo lord, right? It pushes the power over the top, right? We get a giant board and we play a Thales Lieutenant and everything gets much bigger, and then we're able to jam in for 1,000,000, or the opposite happens. We get an early Thales Lieutenant, we keep playing humans just because all the creatures in our deck are humans, and we have a giant Thales Lieutenant we can ride in the back of. Brutal Cathar is our main deck removal spell of choice. The beauty of Brutal Cathar is that on curve, it's very powerful, being able to get rid of a creature that plans on blocking. But also in the late game, it's pretty sweet too, because if you can start getting it to flip back and forth, then it can remove even more creatures and become very, very powerful. There's a few things to be aware of with Brutal Cathar, though. One is that all the creatures come back, even if you have multiple exiled with Brutal Cathar, when it dies, which can lead to some giant swings when they finally find a removal spell for Brutal Cathar. And its opposite side, its werewolf side, is red, not white. And it's not a human. So that means when it's on its werewolf side, it will not get counters from Thales Lieutenant, and it will not get protection from Brave the Elements. So it's important to keep that in mind. Adeline is one of our most powerful cards as well. It is a 3-mana star 4. Vigilance. Its power is equal to the number of creatures you control, so it's always at least a 1/4, or a 2/4 if you're planning to attack with it. Whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So very often, you like curve our 1-drop into any of our 2-drops, which is powerful, gem for 3 on turn 2 normally, or have disruption. And then turn 3, you Adeline, and then when you attack, notice it's any creature, you'll get a 1/1 from attacking, not just Adeline, and then you'll have a massive, massive attacker for the following turn, and that curve is so strong. It's so very, very strong. And so again, the point of the deck is to be playing our creatures, going as wide as possible, jamming in as fast as possible, removing any important blockers, and then once they do have blockers that we can't remove, we just Brave the Elements and continue jamming in. Or we get creatures that are too big to block, and that's just beautiful. As far as our sideboard goes, Portable Hole is for these aggro matchups, but it's also really strong against mono green in being able to take out their mana dorks. There's basically anything that we think it's really important to remove this mana value 2 or less. We bring in our Portable Holes. Rest in Peace, mostly for Greasefang, but there are some other pseudo graveyard-based decks. Rename. It's for a couple different decks. It's really good against mono green because it slows down Karn and like Storm the Festival. It's reasonably solid against Fires of Invention, but also the shield side is extremely good against Red-Black Sack. Like, if you cast that against Red-Black Sack is not winning the game. Or even the shield side is not bad in the mirror match. The shield side is not bad against Burn. The rating is pretty good in a lot of situations. However, notice it is not a human, so keep that in mind when you decide to bring in the card. Wedding Announcement is basically our mid-range and control killers. It gives us 3 1/1s. Or draws us a card on its front side, and on the back side, it's an Anthem. So normally what happens is, they remove a bunch of your creatures. You, turn 3 or 4, Wedding Announcement. You get a 1/1, try to replay a creature, get another 1/1 where you replay a creature, get a third 1/1, replay a creature, and now they're massive. And you get to keep jamming in, and each one of these creatures will require a removal spell from your opponent. Is so, so very powerful. Also, the creatures are humans, which is good. And Skyclave Apparition I kind of treat it as our Brutal Cathar 5 and 6. It's not a human, unfortunately. However, even though it's not a human, it can take out non-creature things. It can take out things like the temporary lockdown. It can take out the Karn. So any situation where you might want a Brutal Cathar, I like also bringing in Skyclave's Apparition. So hopefully that video was helpful, and you're going to beat some people with mono white humans. If it was helpful, please be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Check out my social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.